Welcome to the Buy Box Experts podcast. We bring to light the unique opportunities brands face in today's e-commerce world.
Hi, I'm James Thompson, one of the hosts of the Buy Box Experts podcast. I'm a partner with Buy Box Experts and the former business head of the Selling on Amazon team at Amazon, as well as the first account manager for the Fulfillment by Amazon program. I'm the co-author of the book, Controlling Your Brand in the Age of Amazon, and co-founder of the Prosper Show, one of the largest continuing education conferences for sellers in North America. Today's episode is brought to you by Buy Box Experts. Buy Box Experts takes ambitious brands and makes them unbeatable. When you hire Buy Box Experts, you receive the strategy optimization and marketing performance to succeed on Amazon. Go to buyboxexperts.com to learn more. Today, our guest is Ben Rohr, CEO of Meluka Australia, an Australian health and wellness firm that grows and manufactures tea tree oil, honey, and probiotic concentrate. Prior to Meluka Australia, Ben has been an investment director, a strategic property consultant, and co-founder of a successful retail coffee and roasting chain in Australia. In full disclosure to our listeners, Meluka Australia and Buy Box Experts work together on Meluka Australia's Amazon US channel business today. So welcome, Ben, and thank you for joining us today on the Buy Box Experts podcast.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ben, I've got to start by asking you, tell me about the Australian tea tree. How does this make the Meluka honey brand different and special?
I'm not sure if many of your listeners are probably familiar with tea tree oil. This comes from a species of tea tree called Meluka alternifolia, and this is native to the region of where our plantation and farms exist in northern New South Wales in Australia. The leaves of that tea tree, the Meluka alternifolia, are known for their antibacterial properties. The Indigenous Australians used it. They refer to this region where which is the birthplace of this species, as a healing ground. They used it on their skin. They used it in tea for medicinal purposes. And a lot of people globally use tea tree oil exactly for that use, which is for its antibacterial properties, in cleaning, in skincare, in a whole lot of other properties. In relation to our Meluka honey, the bees are harvesting from that species as well as other Australian botanical species, and so it produces this very unique flavour and medicinal honey.
So I'm better off eating honey for breakfast every morning if it's Meluka honey.
Well, I think you're better off eating any raw honey, particularly.
Yes.
Every morning for breakfast, as opposed to non-raw honey, and ours has these other antibacterial properties which we think are really unique.
Great. So let me ask you, you've been on Amazon for a short period of time. Talk to me about some of the biggest fundamental challenges that adding the Amazon channel has created for your company. How has the leadership team made the mental shift to embrace this changing distribution model of having Amazon as part of your overall business?
It's a really interesting question, James, and probably has a whole lot more relevance in these times today. Mm-hmm. Look, we're a relatively, particularly in relation to the honey, a relatively new brand. We only launched it just over a year ago, even in Australia. And when we were looking at opportunities to distribute this outside of Australia, it is really challenging to set up your own sales force and to get into the brick and mortar stores. Mm-hmm. There's so many hoops you have to get through, particularly for a new brand. Amazon make it easy for you to at least get a listing on their platform. So in regards of actually just getting in the door, that's a start. But if, probably a bit naively last year when we were looking at this, we thought, this is just a really big e-commerce platform that, a significant amount of Americans engage on. So we have to be there. But when you look at the complexities about how that relates to being able to get presence and to grow your business, mm-hmm. It is, I would dare say, from our point of view, a black box. So it became very challenging for myself, the executive, and the board to really get in behind that strategy without the expertise within our own team.
once you got the expertise in place, how did you set the expectations of what you might potentially actually realize from this channel? I mean, you jumped in saying there were a lot of potential U.S. customers, but did you have any better sense in terms of what you were actually getting yourself into?
Yeah, look, we did a fair bit of market research on the US before we decided to make, I guess, Amazon a pillar of our strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the key difference with the 4 honey products that we had at the point in time was that our honey is organic and it's raw. And when we looked at the US market, look, there are a lot of raw honey products on the
Mm-hmm.
market.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's not a lot of organic products on the market. And when we looked at the Amazon platform, that search confirmed to us it is really challenging to harvest organic honey. Bees can fly up to 5 kilometres, and so you need a significant area of land that you can confirm hasn't been treated with any pesticides or insecticides.
Mm-hmm.
And the way farming is today, that's a really large portion of land. In Australia, we're blessed with a very small population and a continent as a nation.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of land, and a lot of land that is deemed organic. And so in that regard, we have this unique product, and we saw a unique fit to the US market. And so the decision to go to the US drove that, but then the decision to go to Amazon was more about the fact that when I was speaking initially with BuyBox, some of the stats that were given to me via the sales rep were compelling. And I actually spoke to an Amazon rep at Expo West last year who really convinced me that it should be a centerpiece of our approach to that market.
So let's talk about the current COVID crisis. What kinds of challenges has your organization been faced with, and how have you tackled them, given how quickly these unexpected changes have crept up on us?
They're really good problems to have, James, but getting a honey product, we had a significant bushfire or wildfire, I think you call them, problem earlier in the year, which impacted a lot of the area where our plantation exists, which impacted on a lot of supply. And then when you combine this with the fact that the US is a long way away, and all of a sudden the world just shut down, overnight, literally. And then we had this platform that had this, growth in customers coming in looking for products and placing orders. So we had this demand-driven sort of pressure on our supply chain that was already under pressure as a result of the wildfires. So we just had to hustle, James, to get product over as quickly as we could. We initially were sending a lot of air freight, which, while those routes were still open and affordable, that was a really viable pathway. However, that cost has just become unviable. And so we just were lucky that we managed to just get ahead of the curve and make a couple of really good decisions on manufacturing large volumes and getting it over there to meet that demand. And now I think we've got a number of sea shipments at sea that should meet our still ever-growing demand. But it was very, very challenging. It was touch and go.
Mm-hmm. So one of the oddities about Amazon is that if your business takes off and you find yourself with more demand than you anticipated, Amazon ends up punishing you if you don't end up keeping the inventory in place. And so how do you deal with so-called good news of customers being interested in your products?
What's great about that, James, is that when we first launched, you guys launched for us on the platform and took control of it. And I think we just outstripped demand very early, one of the first 2 months, and we ran out of inventory. Mm-hmm. And even though your rep at the time had explained to us the dangers of that, we felt it. And it was very low numbers, so it didn't really impact us. And so we knew firsthand that pain. And so that prepared us for when it would have been far more significant, the damage later during the early part of this year. And that helped us, hustle, because you're exactly right. This Amazon platform I didn't realize going into this how brutal they were for, supply chain problems.
Yes. Yes.
We're a small business that's growing. It's not, I don't think there's a small business alive that does not have supply chain problems.
Yep. Yep. So talk to me during the crisis. Are there things that you've learned about your customers' interaction with the brand? Things that you've learned that you can apply to your business after we get to a new normal post-COVID situation?
That's a really interesting point, because I would say most of the learnings come from more supply chain stress and how to build to manage or mitigate risk in that side of things. But from a customer point of view, what was really interesting for us was how significantly, particularly on the Amazon platform, how it can change overnight, that demand. And that was not something we ever considered. I mean, we just did not think our sales could go from a very slow growth month-to-month model to literally overnight. And trying to gather that information of why that's happening has probably been something that I think Amazon's potentially lacking, because we don't really understand why that happened in such a way. And it's kind of more art than science, if you know what I mean, which for a data-driven platform seems illogical, at least from our point of view. And so it is kind of crucial to have someone like BuyBox there holding your hand, because, I would have had no chance of being able to convince the board to keep funding this strategy and getting the growth that we had if I couldn't justify some of the things that were happening. And again, I would say more art than science.
It almost begs the question, what else have you got to sell that we can throw on Amazon and see how that goes? So let's talk a little bit more about the Amazon channel. When you think about the opportunity to sell a lot more product on the channel, certainly there are sales revenue opportunities. Are there other types of ways in which you can leverage this channel beyond just generating more sales revenue? Talk to me about the good, the bad, the ugly, things that you think that you can leverage through this channel.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. There's a perception in Australia, and whether this is right or wrong in the US, that Amazon is really for cheaper, lower-end brands. Now, we are a high-end brand, fully vertically integrated, fully traceable. We control all aspects of the supply chain. So it is very expensive, the production chain for our smaller company. And so therefore we have a really premium product that is priced accordingly. And so the logic of, I guess, convincing the Australian perception that Amazon is more for a cheaper discount type product, to say that we can represent our brand in a way that reflects, that we want it to be reflected, is actually something that I have evolved and learned that Amazon does actually have that capability. If you've got the enhanced brand content, if you've got your own store,
yes,
you can actually present it within that fairly ugly looking platform in a way that actually does make it look really beautiful and enables you to, in many ways, stand out from the crowd. I actually think that our lead honey, which is an everyday honey, there are a lot of competitors in our segment, however, not really that are presenting the honey like we're presenting it. And I actually think it's been a bit of a strength, because it's just a bit of a differentiator, particularly in the top 20 honeys that are sitting within that category.
So I want to take your comments about the Amazon platform. Talk to me about, are we seeing Amazon Australia also being viewed this way by folks within Australia?
It's a really interesting thing. Amazon Australia, I have probably daily discussions with Australians about this. Australia's got some real logistical challenges. And obviously in the US, Amazon has been able to nail this logistics solution, which has been their strength and what has driven this demand. Being able to get this free delivery in such a prompt time is the real killer. And in Australia, they've only launched FBA in the last 12 months.
Yes.
And they're really struggling. They're not getting the uptake. They're not getting the eyes on the platform. They're basically giving away Prime memberships. If you go on there, you can just shop without actually signing up to Prime, shop like you're a Prime customer.
Yep.
And so therefore it's a really hard market to compare because they've struggled. If I look at the sales on our Amazon Australian site, the delivery delays from order are significant compared to the US. So I think Amazon is still trying to resolve the logistical solution in Australia. And until they do, they just won't be able to create that comparative advantage. I'm confident they will.
Mm-hmm.
But Australia's a small market in the grand scheme of things. We have 25 million people and a really large space of land. So it is a real challenge for Amazon. It'll be interesting to see if they can make it work.
I'm from Canada. Amazon went into Canada. Same issue. Lots and lots of geography, not a lot of population. It's taken them good 5-6 years to figure it out, but we're now starting to see some very good traction in Canada. So I would bet on Amazon to eventually figure this one out.
I'd be a fool if I bet against Amazon.
So talk to me about how have you been able to get U.S. customers to discover your brand? Certainly putting the products on Amazon and doing some advertising helps, but are there other types of things you've done outside of Amazon that have created awareness of what is this Meluka brand and why should I be buying it over other brands of honey?
Yeah, well, we've got our own e-commerce website as well, and we do a lot of promotional work via that, and that's exactly how we want our brand represented
Mm-hmm.
within our own ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're still refining that message, and we do advertising across all the usual sort of social media channels,
Yep.
and via Google and Bing and all the different search engines to try and build that awareness. But we also, until earlier this year, had a reasonably active brick and mortar approach to tell our story. So we've actually been selling bulk tea tree oil into the US for over a decade, and so we have an established base actually in Santa Clarita in California, and so via that we've got we generally go to a lot of the trade shows like Expo West.
Mm-hmm.
And present the brand. The brand will have its own stand, and we also talk regularly to the sort of key brick and mortar distribution channels that are around. We just haven't gone into it because it's a different approach, and we were doing it. The interesting thing with the brick and mortar channel, even prior to COVID-19, we were seeing quickly see results and traction that you can very quickly translate into a successful model, at least from a modelling perspective. Whether on the traditional side, you've got to show relevancy in other ways, and you've got to try and demonstrate that your product is, you're willing to put marketing dollars behind something up front.
Mm-hmm.
Without actually getting a sale even in the door. And so it makes it a real challenge for a new brand to get noticed. You really need someone that just gets convinced by your story. And that usually takes a couple of years of going to these expos, knocking on the same doors, and then they realize you're not a fly in the night kind of operation. Yes. And so, let's give them a go. And a couple of years would be very quick. It's probably more like 3 or 4. And this is why the Amazon platform, I guess, gave us this advantage, because we can now use the Amazon platform to potentially leverage that other network and say, look, customers like us, and we're selling product, and there's the evidence. So wouldn't you think it makes sense to, give us a go?
Yes. So talk to me more about, how do you think about the shopping cart on your own website versus shopping carts on marketplaces like Amazon? How do you use them tactically? How do you use them strategically? How do you balance the customers that are found in one place versus another?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we've gone a different approach, and we're not 100% sold on this. We're still learning. We actually advertise that we are on Amazon on our site. So through the cart, you can click at any point and buy that same product on Amazon. We don't want to lose customers. We only do this in the US, interestingly enough. We don't do this in Australia. We don't want to lose customers because they can't easily go through that purchasing experience. And we've made the assumption, given the amount of bounce rate that we had early on with our website without those buttons, that those customers were going onto Amazon anyway and searching for the product. And so we just tried to make it a bit more convenient. I guess one of the advantages on our website when people do go through and check out that we can control a lot more is that cross-purchasing, the upsell.
Yes.
I know Amazon do have it, but they have it in their own way.
Right.
And a customer gets it with everything that they buy on Amazon. So I'm not sure they really even notice it most of the time, because if they're always on Amazon, it's just a pop-up that they're used to. Whether if they're new to our site, then these things are new and these products are new, and we can certainly, I think, provide a different experience for them that we think is more enhanced than Amazon. However, I think Amazon have a much quicker, they have that one-click process.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to enter the address. It's just a far more efficient checkout. It's completely logical. When I was living in the US, which wasn't that long ago, I did all my shopping on Amazon as well. So I completely understand why the consumer is using that platform.
So when our BuyBox Experts sales team talks to prospective brand clients, one of the biggest challenges we see is brands' lack of awareness that dealing with Amazon requires a very different set of skills compared to running their own shopping cart. You talked a little bit about this earlier in our discussion. What were some of your organization's hard knocks in getting the Amazon channel to work for you? What did you quickly realize, oops, we can't quite do this ourselves?
I would say...
And I'm not looking for you to compliment us. I'm just trying to understand.
No, James. The irony is I do have a bit of e-commerce experience, right? But I did not have, and this is more me driving this Amazon strategy internally on our side. Everyone else I'm working with didn't have any e-commerce background. And so it was really me evangelizing it. And that was because as soon as I got in there, I went, this isn't what I thought it was.
Right.
And I went, what the hell am I doing here? And almost instantly I knew I needed help. And so, to be honest, it was just naivety on our side as to what Amazon was, just another e-commerce platform. It's not just another, it's a whole ecosystem unto itself. And you don't go into that without experts on board. And so given our strategy is a hands-off strategy, we don't want to build sales streams. We're a smaller company. We want to control things from Australia. It just made complete sense to go with an expert in this area. And it didn't take me long at all. Just searching through the dashboard alone and looking at the different reports, I realized that we didn't have the skill set on our side. And if we wanted to make this a success, we needed to find that skill set.
So I want to change gears a little bit here, Ben, and I want to talk about your professional mentors and the kinds of advice that they have given you over the years as you've changed the types of industries in which you've worked. And you have more breadth than most people we talk to in terms of different industries, different types of jobs. Talk to me about the kinds of mentorship that you've had and the kinds of advice that have helped you get to the place where you are today.
James, that's a really interesting question. I've got a very, very checkered background in terms of my hopping across industries. I was a classic case of getting through high school and doing well without exceptional, going to college and doing well without being exceptional, because I chose these broad-based type topics because it was more about employability. I'm a Gen X. It was more about employability than aspirational. I want to be, the next Hugh Jackman. So therefore I'll be an actor. It was more like, if I'm going to get through life, I've got to choose something that is, there's a job at the end of it kind of thing. But at the same time, as you go through life, you realize, you've got to enjoy things. And if you want to be successful at things, and this is very early in my piece, one of a mentor I worked with, and effectively it was like a fintech startup. He was so passionate about what we were building then, and I was more on the finance side, that he, without actually even explicitly saying it to me, he made it very clear that if I was to be successful, I needed to find something I really enjoyed doing. And this checkered background is probably a sign that each thing that I've sort of switched to meant I really didn't enjoy it before I made the switch. And I had to look for another challenge, or I'd get to a point where I would be getting bored or whatever. I wasn't what I wanted to be. So I made this move. And funnily enough, with where I am today, I've been in, with the same group for 5 years now, which is as long as I've ever been with anyone. And I'm really enjoying the challenges and the process that we're going through and growing out this brand, working with the founders that had this amazing property, and then, trying to bring this to the world. I think I've found it, if you know what I mean, James. And so, that was one particular mentor, but as you go along that journey, you need to develop the confidence to be able to make those switches. And different mentors over the years have shown me that, I was always a bit risk averse in the younger years, where you would be nervous to make that step. Those mentors sort of said to me that, don't be nervous. I mean, I'm really lucky. I've grown up in an era where we've had, Australia actually until probably now hasn't had a recession since the early 90s. And that was right when I was finishing high school. So we've had this great period of world growth that has brought full employment opportunities and things like that. I really feel for some of the younger people today, going through what we're going through right now, and trying to understand how I would act in this situation if I found myself without a job. So, the mentors played a part, but also I see myself as incredibly lucky to be living through such a prosperous time for the Western world anyway, for developed nations.
Thank you for sharing those insights with me, Ben. I want to wrap up our discussion today by asking you a question around the overall experience on Amazon that you've had. What advice would you give to brands looking to manage their online presence on Amazon such that they could create alignment with the kinds of work they've done in creating distribution in other channels?
Look, honestly, the very first thing, and I know this is going to look like I'm plugging for BuyBox, but I'm not. I can tell you, I'm telling you, you need an expert. You need an expert that will help you navigate. We refer to Amazon internally as the black box. If you don't have an expert, then you are not. Only luck will determine how well you go on that platform, and no one wants to go into business based on luck.
Right.
Unless you're a gambler. And then trying to align that with the things you can control is so important. And so you need an expert that's going to be able to help you, tell your brand story that you can control in the way that you can control through the mechanisms that you can control, like your own e-commerce store or the brick and mortar distribution channels. And you need to be able to communicate that to an expert to say, this is how you need to do it within Amazon. It changes so rapidly. We're seeing change, day to day on our advertising and in our brand building within that Amazon platform. And I honestly, as someone who actually has a bit of experience in this, I put my hands up in the air and just say, thank God I've got someone else looking at this.
Yes.
They have a team behind them that is doing the research to be able to then hopefully communicate that back to us, so I can then, develop an education to support and to feed this platform. If you're growing rapidly, you need to feed it with resource, and no one wants to allocate resource to a thing they don't understand. And so this is, I would say, honestly, the number one thing you need to do is get an expert, get their help. If it's not BuyBox, someone else that is an expert, and then make sure you're communicating to them regularly about the things that are happening and the things that you're seeing, and demand of them to explain to you what's happening on Amazon.
I wish I could explain some of the aspects of the business that we simply don't fully understand, but certainly I hear what you're saying loud and clearly with looking at this Amazon sandbox as a creature in and of itself. So Ben, I want to thank you for joining us today. For those of you interested in learning more about Ben's organization, please visit melukaaustralia.com.
Thanks, James.
Thanks for listening to the BuyBox Experts podcast. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web, and we'll see you next time.